From the pages of fantasy to the reality of our world, the direwolf, the legendary guardian of House Stark, has leapt from the Game of Thrones into an actual existence after 10,000 years of extinction. Colossal Biosciences claims to have successfully created the first de-extinct direwolves using DNA from ancient fossils. But as we race to resurrect species from the woolly mammoth to the dodo bird, we're venturing into uncharted territory. Today we're going off the radar and diving into the ethics of de-extinction. We'll explore the profound questions this technology raises. Just because we can bring back extinct species, should we? What are the ecological implications? And who profits from playing God with genetic code? I'm meteorologist Emily Gracie, and you're listening to Off the Radar, a production of the National Weather Desk. On the show, we dig deep into topics about weather, climate, the ocean, space, and much more. Our goal is to help you better understand the weather and to love it as much as we do.
Craving your next action-packed adventure? Audible delivers thrills of every kind on your command, like Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, where a lone astronaut must save humanity from extinction, narrated with stunning intensity by Ray Porter. From electrifying suspense and daring quest to spine-tingling horror and romance in far-off realms, unleash your adventurous side with gripping titles that'll keep you guessing. Discover exclusive Audible originals, hotly anticipated new releases, and must-listen bestsellers that hook you from the first minute. Because Audible knows there's no greater thrill than the one that speaks to you. Discover what lies beyond the edge of your seat. Start your free 30-day trial at audible.com/WonderyUS. That's audible.com/WonderyUS.
In the winter hush during a snowfall, when the air is so crisp and quiet you could hear a twig snap, prey animals are on high alert. If they're aware of their surroundings, they're constantly scanning the environment, looking ahead and behind, side to side, sniffing for any scent of a predator that the winds might blow their way. But a good hunter knows how to hide from its prey until just the right moment. Larger, faster prey animals tend to have an advantage over smaller creatures. Even a gray wolf tends to go after smaller targets. But in the case of the direwolf, it's thought that a pack of wolves could easily take down large prey animals like horses, bison, and even woolly mammoths. They had razor-sharp teeth and a stronger bite than other wolves, and their larger body size meant more muscle mass and greater overall power. The direwolf once paced the plains, forests, and mountains of North America. Like its modern-day descendants, these apex predators were ferocious hunters, but the direwolf was much larger. They grew up to 6 feet long, nose to tail, and weighed about 150 pounds. That's almost 25% heavier than gray wolves. Researchers believe that while the direwolf was well adapted to hunting large prey animals, it couldn't compete with the smaller, faster gray wolves who hunted smaller, faster prey. When large mammals like the woolly mammoth went extinct, direwolves were left unprepared for the new reality that a changing climate and evolving ecosystem presented. It's a species of wolf that's been extinct for 10,000 years. What we know about their hunting habits and lifestyle comes largely from fossil records. At the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles, for example, the high concentration of direwolf fossils suggests that the animals hunted in packs like their smaller relatives, the gray wolf. But now, theories are finally able to be put to the test. Colossal Laboratories in Biosciences recently announced the completion of their first in a series of so-called de-extinction projects. It's an endeavor that sounds straight out of the pages of Jurassic Park, but instead of extracting dinosaur DNA from fossilized mosquitoes, Colossal Biosciences extracted DNA from a 13,000-year-old direwolf tooth unearthed in Ohio, and a 72,000-year-old direwolf skull that was excavated in Idaho. Using these genetic markers, scientists were able to bioengineer DNA that's a 91% match with that of an extinct direwolf. Researchers then implanted the direwolf DNA into dogs' egg cells to facilitate a surrogate birth. Appropriately enough, the first 2 wolves were born and named Romulus and Remus, the names of twin brothers in Roman mythology, who were raised by a wolf. The third wolf was named Khaleesi, after the character in Game of Thrones. George R.R. Martin's books and TV series featured direwolves, and Martin is a cultural advisor and investor to Colossal Biosciences. The biotech company doesn't plan to stop with direwolves. They're also planning de-extinction projects involving woolly mammoths and dodo birds. And de-extinction is big business. In-Q-Tel, a venture capital firm affiliated with the CIA, has been a substantial investor in Colossal Biosciences. But Jeff Goldblum has a famous line in Jurassic Park that may come to mind.
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they didn't stop to think if they should.
What are the ethics of de-extinction? The dodo bird went extinct hundreds of years ago. It's thought that dogs, pigs, and macaws drove the species to extinction after humans introduced these mammals to the bird's native island. De-extinction of dodos may feel like a course correction for historical human behavior, but what about direwolves and woolly mammoths? My guest today is Dr. Jay Odenbaugh, a professor and researcher with a concentration in philosophy of science. He has studied the ethics of de-extinction and written extensively on the topic. And with the recent direwolf news, his work now feels more relevant than ever. This is all a buzz on the internet right now.
Yes.
People are going wild for this. Direwolf, something that maybe people haven't even heard of until the past couple of days. So let's talk about this. Can you give me a little background on what actually has happened here with Colossal Biosciences and what they've done with direwolves?
Yeah. So, direwolves went extinct somewhere 13,000 years ago, ish. And the Colossal has basically used precision gene editing to take essentially two samples of direwolf bone and I believe a tooth fragment and extract DNA from it. And what they did is about 14 genes from a gray wolf, modified those genes so that you would get essentially what is, by all appearances, looks like a direwolf. Has the same kind of call, same body, musculature, hair color, all of that. And so that's what they've done just recently.
Has this ever been done before?
Not in this way. I mean, I think, we all probably heard about Dolly being cloned many, many years ago. But this is surprising both because most of us didn't know this was about to happen, right? There was been a lot of attention on woolly mice because of the woolly mammoth possible revival, as we might call it, right?
Okay, so you say revival. There's the word de-extinction being thrown around out there right now. Another word that I've never heard of until this past day.
Well, there's also resurrection. Sometimes people use that word too, right?
Wow. Okay, so this is why I'm talking to you, the philosopher, because I want to know, is this actually de-extinction? I want to know all your thoughts on what's going on here.
I'm suspicious in this case that we actually have a direwolf. And the reason is that essentially what we've done is modified, or we haven't, but they have modified gray wolf genes so that you get the appearance of something that looks like a direwolf. It's because that you're modifying gray wolf genes that's really why I'm a bit suspicious. In some gene editing, you splice the DNA from ancient extinct organisms into, say, if you're going to create a woolly mammoth, you might take DNA from woolly mammoth and splice it into a Asian elephant. But this case is a little bit different than that. The other thought is, I think the best case scenario, if you really wanted to think this is a direwolf, best case scenario is this is a hybrid between gray wolves and direwolves, because you are using the information from direwolf genes to create, this remarkable, it's clearly a remarkable creature, whatever it is, right?
Okay, so I guess what a lot of people are wondering too is why? Why would anybody do this?
That's a fantastic question. And I think there are a lot of rationales. One rationale is that it looks cool, and so we should do it. Kind of almost a Jurassic Park like justification.
That's been thrown around a lot too.
Yeah. If we didn't learn anything from that movie, what are we doing, right? But a different sort of thought here is that it was wrong to drive direwolves to extinction. I'm assuming it's partly human caused, right? And if we could bring them back in a way, that would be kind of repairing a wrong that we did. But that depends crucially on whether or not this is really a direwolf. If someone wrongs you by taking something that's yours, that's not theirs, they make amends by returning it, right? But I can't give that back to someone that looks like you, but it's not really you, and that be an act of restoration.
The world that actual direwolves lived in was very different than where we are now. So what are the implications here when we talk about what's the prey, what's the predator, what are they eating, where are they living?
Yeah, so right now they are in an undisclosed ecological reserve. I think, if you do their dire wolves, many people would want to see them, and people who might be really worried about this might, want to remove them. So, it's a secret hideout, as it were. as it is now, I think they're being fed, basically various kinds of meat, horse meat, cattle, beef, etc. But for all intents and purposes, it seems that they will be on this ecological preserve forever, right? Which raises another ethical concern, which is the well-being of those individual wolves. If they never can exhibit the kind of predator instincts they have, or if they're very nervous around humans, even the ones that have handled them after birth, they stay pretty far away from. They're not like dogs, though the DNA, the embryos were placed in mixed hounds so that they could gestate and be born. So I really worry about what's the life of a dire wolf, basically in a pen, a glorified pen, will be.
Right, and that's the dire wolf. And they say their next project is the woolly mammoth coming soon in 2028. So what does that look like? And I don't understand the purpose of that either.
Well, that's an interesting case because one of the things that people worry about when it comes to climate change is permafrost melt. So if you go to Siberia, there's all this methane and carbon beneath the surface. And as that snow melts with warming temperatures, you might think, well, is there a way to prevent that permafrost from melting? One thing that woolly mammoths did thousands of years ago was that they, snapped down that snow, they knocked over trees, etc., and that basically prevented that kind of permafrost melt. So the thought is, if we could reintroduce woolly mammoths, they could do this really valuable thing for us, this kind of ecological role. But there again, we're introducing woolly mammoths, or sometimes they're called mammothants. We'd be introducing them to a habitat they know nothing of. It's tundra, but it's human transformed. So sometimes scientists call this a no analog environment because there's no analog for this in their life history.
Yeah, there's so many parallels here with like climate change and geoengineering, and then the whole what are the long-term impacts here? So what are the long-term impacts here if we start de-extincting other animals and bringing them into this world? Could it mess up entire ecosystems?
It certainly could. If you start thinking about the kinds of things that lived in North America, before us, think about, there were saber-toothed tigers, there were, giant ground sloths. If you wanted to bring those back, it would be remarkable to see creatures like that. But where are you going to put them? And can we live with them in a way that's, makes sense? I worry also, there's two other worries I have, one of which is if you spend money on these projects, what are you not spending money on, including other conservation projects? I know that Colossal is doing conservation work, in particular related to things like genetic bottlenecks. When there's too much inbreeding in a population, that can, lead to disease, etc. And so they are working on conservation issues. But one is we sort of take our eye off other threatened or endangered species. That's one thought. The other one is I think there's a misnomer that appears, namely, for any species that goes extinct, you could just bring it back. And so we don't have to worry about extinction. And that's not true. One thing about de-extinction is most animals that you could bring back, or plants too, DNA degrades over time. And so outside of about 10,000 years, you can't use that DNA. So we could only really bring back really recently extinct species at best, right? So I worry that this sells conservation a kind of a bad message, namely we can bring back things and not worry about it.
So you're saying Jurassic Park is not going to happen then?
No, you can't get pterodactyls and T-Rexes and so on because they're too long extinct, right? We couldn't recover their DNA, even if we found, some sort of deep in some, place that paleontologists could dig up.
Okay, well, let's talk about humans, because one of the projects that Colossal is working on is an artificial womb so that they don't have to impregnate dogs with these things. But my thought is, are they going to use this for human beings? And then my thought goes to, are we going to try to genetically engineer humans from 10,000 years ago?
Right. There has been talk about Neanderthals, right? We share a certain percentage of our DNA with Neanderthals because earlier humans interbred occasionally with other species in our genus. I think gene editing has the potential to do some really remarkable things. So if you could engineer human genes where people who would otherwise be born blind or deaf, that you might think that's a really powerful piece of technology that would benefit human lives. But when you start thinking about designer babies and engineering humans to be as attractive as culturally as you might think, I really worry about that kind of, essentially it's a form of eugenics, right? You're designing humans to be as you want them to be. And that's a dangerous road.
It is. And I hear friends who have gone through IVF recently in recent years. And I went through it a long time ago, 13 years ago. So I'm curious about, because I hear them say, well, we had one egg or we had one embryo that was male and one that was female and we went with the female. So they can actually pick the gender of their baby at this point.
That's right. There's also, being able to, all of us have phenotypic traits, the things that you see, right? And so you might want to have a child who's taller. Right. I'm relatively short, but, I can imagine my parents saying, we want Jane to be 6 foot. Right. Those kinds of things are, in a way, I think they play to some of our worst vices, judging people on superficial qualities. Right. But we've opened Pandora's box, and these are the things that we're now having to confront.
So who controls science? Is there any sort of ethics control on science?
There are a variety of controls. I mean, for example, if you're going to do human research, you have to, basically, there's lots of complicated forms and legislation and rules around that. With regard to animals, non-human animals, it's much more of it's free in other ways, right? Because I can't, a direwolf can't give you informed consent about what's happening, right? They can't sign off on it. So there are rules, but I think it's one thing that's really important to note. Colossal is a private company, right? It's essentially doing this because there's no prohibition against it. And, it's happening outside of federal government or university research and so on. So it's kind of a Wild West at this point. And, I think we need to think very carefully about the path we're going. And it's not to say that gene editing or IVF or any of these things aren't wonderful tools. They can be, but we have to be thoughtful about them.
Yeah. And I was looking at the list of investors for Colossal, and it ranges from, like the creators of Game of Thrones to the CIA,
right?
Which is very interesting.
Well, there's no accident. Their names are Romulus, Remulus, and Khaleesi, right? The 3 new direwolves.
Right. It's good marketing technique.
It is.
Is there anything else you want people to know or think about deeply when it comes to genetic engineering and moving forward in the future?
One thing that you often will hear people say is that they worry about playing God. They worry about humans being, acting without humility and making decisions that really fundamentally change our planet. And I think that's a very serious worry. But I also worry about people who have sometimes it's called Ludditism, right? The idea that machines are bad and technology is bad. If you think de-extinction is bad, you also have to think gene editing is bad. And gene editing could be and has been an important technology that can improve our lives. So we have to find a balance between very extreme views. And in many ways, we've opened the door, and now we need to think carefully about the ethics behind all of it.
Well, at least we have people who think on both sides, which if we were all genetically engineered, wouldn't be the case, right?
That's right. That's right.
The irony. Off the Radar is a production of the National Weather Desk. Make sure you're following the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. The episodes publish every Tuesday. Thank you to Dr. J. Odenbaugh for joining me today to talk about de-extinction. Thanks to the National Weather Desk and Sinclair Broadcast Group for their ongoing support of the podcast, as well as my associate producer, Brian Petras, for his writing contribution to this episode. Also, thank you to Sciline for connecting us with Dr. Odenbaugh. I'm meteorologist Emily Gracie. Make it a great day.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone? Like yesterday. With Indeed, there's no need to stress. You can find amazing candidates fast using sponsored jobs. With sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates so you can reach the people you want faster. And just how fast is Indeed? Well, in the minute I've been talking to you, 23 hires were made on Indeed, according to the Indeed data worldwide. Seriously, there's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed, and listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/WonderyUS. Just go to Indeed.com/WonderyUS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/WonderyUS. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.